In today's webinar, we will be looking at the latest Rails release. We have with us Prathamesh Sompatki, who will be taking us through Rails 5 and all the new features and improvements. Rails 5 is a much more productive and easy to use than previous versions, so let's dive in. A bit about Prathamesh before we start. Prathamesh is a web developer working remotely for BigBinary. He is part of the Rails issues team and closely involved with the Rails 5 release. He is also a contributor to a lot of open source projects, including Ruby on Rails. Thanks for joining us, Prathamesh. And before we start, just a reminder, I would request all participants to please type in any questions that you have during the presentation, and we will take them up in the last 15 minutes of this session. Also, please don't forget to take the conversation live on Twitter using our hashtag StringingWW. You can share your thoughts by tagging us and Prathamesh in your feed using our handles that's up on your screens right now. So, without taking any more time, let's get started. Prathamesh, over to you.
Thanks for having me. So today we will discuss what Rails 5 is and what are all the new features, new improvements that we can use and get started with Rails. So first we will see the overview of Rails 5, what actually Rails 5 is. So the development for Rails 5 was started way back in November. The first commit, if you see, it was done on November 28, 2014. So it's almost like 1.5 years of development has gone into Rails 5. And there are more than 9,300 commits. So these are like many more commits are also coming, but still there are around, hopefully there will be around 10K commits in Rails 5 when it gets finally released. Right now we have beta 3. The 5.0.0 beta 3 version released on RubyGems, and release candidate 1 is coming soon. So hopefully it will be released by end of this month or first few weeks of May. So as you have already seen, there are a lot of work that is being done in Rails 5. So there are a lot of new features, a lot of major features that are in this release. Also, there are many bug fixes, there are many improvements to the existing code, and we will see what are those and how we can use them in our apps. There are also some features which I call DHH features. So DHH is the creator of Ruby on Rails, and he's still involved in Rails and development of Rails. So for Rails 5, he has created his own list of features. And if you see this screenshot, these are all the issues that were opened by DHH specifically for Rails 5.0. And a lot of these issues are already completed and they're already part of Rails 5. So we will see what DHH wanted from Rails 5 and how we can use them. So let's start with some of the major features that are part of Rails 5 release. So first thing is Ruby 2.2.2. So Rails 5 will specifically require this Ruby version. So if you have a Ruby version which is less than 2.2.2, you cannot use Rails 5. It will give an error. Why this change was made? So basically this change was made to take advantage of the latest version of Ruby 2.2 at that time. And one of the big advantages is symbol GC. So Ruby 2.2 introduced this symbol garbage collector. And if you have used Rails before, like if you have used Rails 3, Rails 4, you must have known that there is an issue related to garbage collecting symbols. So there can be DDoS attacks made in a Rails app using these symbols because they were not garbage collected using Ruby. So in Rails 5, that problem will not occur because we are using Ruby 2.2 and above, which has a symbol GC enabled. And symbol GC will garbage collect the symbol. So that is the feature that Rails is leveraging from Ruby language. Other than that, there is also incremental GC, which is introduced in Ruby 2.2, and Rails will also use this. So there will be significant advantage to those people who are using Rails 5 because their apps will be much faster than the older versions of Ruby. When a big change like this happens, like when there is a big change in a language version which Rails supports, Rails has also a chance to clean up some internal code. So they can use some of the new features of Ruby language to clean up the old code that Rails has. And Rails has obviously used this opportunity to start using keyword arguments for some of the code, internal code. And keyword arguments were introduced in Ruby 2, and Rails, as now it depends on 2.2, it can start using it. It also uses module.prepend in some parts. So a big opportunity like this to bump a language version also gives a chance to Rails to clean up some of the internals and make things cleaner. And obviously Rails is using it to fullest. The next major feature is Action Cable. You can use WebSockets and do real-time communication using Rails now, using the Action Cable component. It is a full stack component. It is a sort of a full stack solution where you have a Ruby component also and JavaScript component also. So it's not like you just only have server-side code. You will get all the code. You will get both types of features. You can write the client-side code using Rails as well as server-side code using Rails for WebSockets. And it is based on the PubSub model of Redis. So basically, there will be some publishers who will publish some messages in channels, and subscribers will subscribe to those channels and consume those messages. The main advantage that I can see of using Action Cable is it is seamlessly integrated with other parts of Rails stack. So you can use Active Record, you can use Active Model, Active Support, anything that is already present in Rails. You can use that with your WebSockets code. Let's see an example. So here, what I'm doing is I'm trying to create a connection using Action Cable, and I'm using a feature of Rails related to cookies. So I'm checking whether cookies exist for a particular user. I'm finding that user by that ID, and then I'm making the connection. If the user doesn't exist, then I'm just rejecting the connection as unauthorized. So this way, the Action Cable is very much part of Rails, and you can use other parts of your existing app like seamlessly with your Action Cable code. On the Ruby side of Action Cable, we have WebSocket driver, Neo4r, and current Ruby. So these are the three gems that are used for building Action Cable server-side code. Now, when Action Cable was initially released in the beta version, the first beta 1 version, it was dependent on Event Machine. And there was a lot of discussion in the Ruby community about whether it should depend on Event Machine, whether it should not depend on Event Machine, whether it will make our apps like why we should use Event Machine and all that. So in latest version, in beta 3, it is no longer dependent on Event Machine directly. It is only dependent on these three gems. And obviously it provides an alternative version where if you want Event Machine, then you can use Event Machine version of Action Cable also. But by default, it doesn't have a hard dependency on Event Machine, as well as Redis, as we'll see. So as you might already know, just like Active Record has these adapters for different databases, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and SQLite, Action Cable also has some adapters. The default adapters are inline and async, which are very useful in development mode and test mode, but they cannot be used in production. So for production, we have three adapters: evented Redis, non-evented, and Postgres. When Action Cable was released, initially it only had support for Redis, and but later they also added a PubSub adapter for Postgres, as well as evented Redis and non-evented Redis. So also there is no hard dependency of on Redis from Action Cable. So when it was released, there was also some discussion about will I have to install Redis on my server if I have to use Rails 5? Will there be a hard dependency on Redis? But all of that discussion is no longer relevant now, because it is again no longer a hard dependency on Redis 2. And this makes it a flexible choice. Like if you have a PubSub solution in Postgres, you can still use Action Cable with it. There is no requirement that you only have to use Redis. Now, Action Cable has also given a chance to like rendering a template outside of controller. So traditionally, what we know is in a typical Rails app, we get a request that hits a controller action, and that controller renders a view. But in Action Cable, it is possible, by virtue of Action Cable, it is possible to render a template outside of controller. Now, how this is useful? Let's say you have a partial for user, okay, and that partial renders some content for that user. Now, if you want to send that partial as part of a response from action cable, how you will do it? Either you will have to duplicate code, or you will have to do some other stuff, like you will do some meta programming. But in Rails 5, there is a way to actually render a template or a partial outside of a controller. So you don't have to just render a template inside controller. You can render it inside a channel also. And that is possible by having this method, action controller renderer.render. Using this method, we can render a partial, a JSON response, or a simple HTML stuff outside of the controller, and action cable can use it to reuse your existing code. So Basecamp already uses action cable in production, and their partials for users and other things are reused across their all apps. So in Mac OS X apps, they use same partials. In website, they use same partials. In mobile apps also, they use same partials, and that is possible by this method. As I already said, Basecamp 3 already uses action cable in production. I think they are the first app, project which are using action cable in production. This is one screenshot from our internal Basecamp 3 Campfire project, where you can see that you can add chat comments, and people can see those comments and stuff. So if you want to see action cable in action before trying to dabble with it, you can subscribe to Basecamp 3 and see how they're using it in production. And then you can also obviously write a small chat app to see how it works. The other big feature of Rails 5 is API only apps. So now you can create apps which are API specific. But first we'll see what is an API only app actually. So if you're a web programmer, you must have heard about APIs, Twitter API, which gives us access to all the tweet data that Twitter shows on their website. But we can use that data and we can display that in our app. GitHub API, which gives us access to all the events that happen on GitHub, like somebody commented, somebody opened a pull request, what all commits were made to this particular repository. Now, all of these APIs, they are supplementary APIs. So Twitter already has a web application and they're providing this API. GitHub already has a web application and they're providing this API for consumers. But nowadays, there is a lot of people who want to use client-side frameworks for their apps. They don't want to use server-side frameworks. So people use React, AngularJS, Ember, and a lot of other stuff. And in this case, there is a growing tendency of using Rails only as a backend service. So Rails will only act as a backend API, and there will be a client-side app which will consume that API, or there will be a native app on iOS or Android that will consume that API and only use Rails as a backend. So in this case, there will be no HTML rendered. There will be only JSON data which will be rendered. And it will somewhat use a slim down version of Rails. It will not use the full Rails stack, but it will use a smaller version of Rails. It will obviously have no view layer. So your app views, app helpers will not be there because they are not needed. You just have to, you just want to render the JSON part. Also, Rails comes with some default middlewares. So all of these middlewares which are related to view layer, those are not required in an API only app. So Rails API app will come with a limited set of middlewares. Middlewares which are related to sessions, cookies, they will not be part of this stack. And you can use other gems like JBuilder, Active Model Serializer for generating the JSON responses. By default, Rails API app has support for 2 JSON calls. So if you have a call to converting a record, active record object or some other data into JSON using 2 JSON, it will support it. But obviously, if you want to use some specific gems like JBuilder, Active Model Serializer, or Rails API's JSON, that is also possible. Obviously, though it is a slimmed down version of Rails, it is still Rails because Rails also has a lot of parts like security. Those features will be present in this app too. There will be a lot of part related to caching. That part will also be present in this app. So it is still Rails, a slimmed down version of Rails specifically for API. Now, if you want to generate a new app with this API mode enabled, it can be done using this way: Rails new API app minus minus API, and it will generate the app for only API mode. It will not have the code related to view layer and other stuff. If you want to upgrade an existing app to API only app, then you have to put this configuration: config.api only equal to true in your application.rb, and then that app will start using the stack for API. There are some more changes that you will have to do to make it fully work, and but yeah, this is the main configuration that first needs to be changed to make it API only. Now, these were all like some of the, not all, but some of the major features of Rails 5. Now we will look to development. So what Rails 5 has in store for us when we develop the Rails app, when we start the development. So first thing that we do in a typical development flow is we start the Rails server, right? We do Rails server, and then we go to localhost 3000, and then we start going through our code and our stuff. So one big change that has happened in Rails 5 is the default web server is now Puma. So earlier it was Webrik in previous versions of Rails. We could use Thin, we could use Unicorn, we could use Puma in earlier versions also. But now by default it will be Puma. Now, why this change? Why Puma was required? So it was also required because of using Action Cable. So Action Cable needed a threaded server, but in development, that problem was solved using the Puma web server. In production, you can use multiple servers of like you can use a different server for Action Cable and different server for your application. But in development, we don't want to use like we don't want to have too much complexity by introducing two servers. So the problem was solved by introducing Puma as the default web server. And Rails also comes with, like, Rails 5 newly created apps. They will also come with this configuration file, config.puma.org. So you don't have to create this file by yourself. It will be always there. Now, another interesting change, and I think this people will like this change, is change in the welcome page. So we know that when we do a Rails server and go to localhost 3000, we see this welcome about page. Now, this was like a web, I don't know when this was first created, but this looks very basic, right? But in Rails 5, we will see this. So this is much improved version of the welcome board page. It just has two details, like what is your Rails version and what is your Ruby version. No other details will be there. So yeah, welcome page has got a big facelift in Rails 5. The other important change is related to command line usage, and this will be mostly useful for new people. So in Rails, in previous versions of Rails, if you have to migrate the database, you should do rakedb migrate, right? But if you have to run the server, you will do Rails server. So for some commands we are using rake, and for some commands we are using Rails, and it is always a point of confusion for new people, like when I should use rake, when I should use Rails. Is there a definite way of saying that, okay, for these commands you should use rake, for these commands you should use Rails, and why the difference? So to solve this problem, in Rails 5 you can do Rails DB migrate, you can do Rails server as it was previously also done. You can do Rails assets precompile and everything. Like you can do all the rake tasks that were present earlier. You can run those using Rails command. So all the tasks, all the commands that were already present, you can use those. You can run those commands just using Rails. So this change was specifically made to avoid this confusion and also to extend the Rails tasks and commands using the new command line infrastructure. That job is still in work in progress, and it will not be part of Rails 5.0 release most probably, but that will sort of enhance the limitations of rake. So rake had some limitations related to parsing of arguments, and Rails will hopefully try to remove those limitations through the use of Rails command. But if you're old school and if you still want to use those rake commands like rakedb migrate, you don't have to worry. Basically, those commands are not removed. There is just a proxy over rake, like a wrapper over all those rake commands, and it will just delegate those commands to rake if they exist. Like if you use Rails DB migrate, there is no new DB migrate command added. It will just use rake DB migrate internally, but you don't have to type rake. So that is the point. So rake DB migrate still works. If you want to use rake, you can use rake, but if you want to use Rails, which is sort of a recommended way, better way for new people, you can obviously use that. The other new feature that was added was ability to restart Rails server in development. So many times, like you change some initializer code, okay, and you have to restart the server manually, right? It takes few commands, but still you have to do that manually. So Rails 5 will introduce a command called as Rails restart, and if you run that in your console, it will restart the web server. So if you are using Puma or POW, it will restart the web server immediately. And internally, it will what it will do is it will just touch a temp restart.txt file, and by checking the timestamp on that file, Rails will try to restart the server. So it is sort of similar to how we do how Passenger web server, which is used by people in production when using Rails, how it does restart. It also, whenever you touch a temp restart.txt, Passenger restarts the web server. So it is somewhat similar to that. But currently it only works with POW and Puma. So Puma is the default web server which comes with Rails 5. So it will work out of the box. But if you are upgrading some older app which doesn't use Puma, then it might not work. So you will have to check which web server you are using, because Rails, the web server that you're using, it has to know that, okay, temp.restart.txt is touched, now I should restart the server. So that part you will have to check which web server you're using. But it works out of the box with Puma. The other new thing is dev cache method. So most of the times, as you already know, as you already might be knowing, the caching that we have, that only works in production mode. It is disabled in development and test. So let's say you want to cache some content on your users page. You add code for caching, but you cannot test it by default. You have to make some changes in your config environments development.rb to enable the caching in development, and then only you can test whether that caching is working properly or not. But in Rails 5, you don't have to do that because of this command. So if you run this command, then it will just enable the caching in development mode, and it acts as a toggler. So if you run it again, it will again disable the caching in development mode. So it will just act as a toggler, and it will toggle the caching in development mode. It also restarts app. So as a side effect, if you are changing some initializer code, you can your app will be restarted by running the Rails dev cache command. So this is useful when you want to test some caching stuff that you have in your code. In development mode, you can now do it without having manually changing the development.rb file. Just run this command, and it will enable the caching mode. Another good thing that was added was related to routes. So if you have like thousands, not thousands, but at least hundreds of routes in your application, it becomes very easy to see like which route I'm trying to find, or it becomes very easy to actually filter the routes. Obviously, you can use operating system commands like grep and stuff, but still Rails, in the Rails 5, there will be a sort of a native way provided by Rails to filter these routes. So it is filtering is easier now. So you can use -c switch to filter the routes by controllers. So this will find all the routes related to users controller and wherever the users string is used. Then if you want to use, if you want to filter namespace routes, you can pass admin/users, and it will find all those routes related to admin namespace and users resource. And then you can use like you can filter it by a specific controller name. I want post controller routes, I want users controller route. I can just pass them as an argument and it will work. There is one more thing which is -g, and this is similar to a grep command that we have in Unix. So if you want to search all the routes with patch verb, you can use that. You can get those by -g patch. You can get all the routes related to admin. Now this is not just the admin controller, but you can, let's say you're using admin somewhere in your route verb, that route will also be filtered by using -g. So this is how you can filter routes easily in Rails 5. Another good thing that has happened, which is not exactly a user fronting, like you will not, there is no command to use this, but still, it is a feature called as evented file system monitor. So we know that in development mode, Rails always reloads our code. So if something changes in, let's say in our app models post.rb, we don't have to restart the server manually. It will just, Rails will just reload the code automatically, and that new code will get reflected when we refresh the page next time. So that feature looks very simple, and it is very useful for development mode, but internally it is very complex. It has to keep track of all the files that are changed. It has to do a walkthrough through all the application files to see what has changed and stuff like that. So internally it is very complex, and it also spends time in doing all of this stuff. So in Rails 5, there will be a evented file system monitor. So Rails will keep track of what files have changed, and it will only try to reload those files. So it doesn't have to do whole application walkthrough. It will know that, okay, these 5 files have changed. I will only go through these 5 files. I don't have to go through all the files. So this is enabled by using this config file watcher config. And I think in development mode, by default, it will be enabled. And you can use it by enabling the listen gem. So internally it will use this gem called as listen, which will track your file changes to your files and through operating system signals, and then it will notify Rails what to do. So Rails will spend less time in figuring out which files have changed. So if you have like thousands of files, thousands of assets or models or controllers, it will be a significant boost to your autoloading code. So, but again, this is not a user-facing change. It will just run in the background automatically for you. Okay, so these were all things related to development mode. Now we will switch to testing. Now, testing in Rails world is like an integral part of your workflow. You write your code, you run your tests, then some tests fail, you change some code, then those tests start passing, and this workflow goes on and on and on. So Rails 5 also has some good improvements to make testing fun, easier. So the biggest feature is a test runner. So if you use the default Rails stack, you might be knowing that Rails comes with a mini-test framework. So mini-test is the testing library in Ruby, and Rails internally uses it, enhances it, and allows users to use it by default. But in previous Rails versions, there was no test runner kind of thing associated with that mini-test. What do I mean by test runner? Let's say if I'm using RSpec, which is another testing library in Ruby. If I'm using that library, then there are a lot of ways in which I can run my test. If I run my test in some particular configuration, I can see which tests are failing. Then it prints a line with the test. It actually prints a line in the output, which I can just copy and paste in the console and run the actual failing test again. So I don't have to run through the whole test. I can just see it just outputs the tests that are failing, and I can just run those. So there are a lot of these good features that are present in RSpec, which were not present in Rails's test framework. So in Rails 5, like a test runner has been added, which is built on top of Minitest, and which is inspired from RSpec and other testing libraries. Using this test runner, we can run our test using this newly added bin Rails test command. And it will allow us to do all these fancy things. Like if I want to just run the test from user test from line number 27, I can do it. this was not possible previously by just using the default Rails testing code. If I want to run multiple tests, like I want to run tests from models and jobs, that is also possible. Let's say I want to see the failure message. As I discussed earlier, Aspect shows it which test has failed. So here you can see that it prints the test name and line number which is failed, and then I can just copy paste it in the console, and then it will just run that test from line number 15. It will not run all the tests. Then you can also fail fast if you pass the -f switch to the binRails t command. Then once one of the tests fails, then it will just stop the running the next test. Next test will not be run. The process will just stop, as you can see here, interrupted and exiting. So this is how you can fail fast, and you will see the outputs immediately after one or two failing tests. You can also see backtrace by passing the -b switch. So let's say if you have some error in your code, by default, if you run Rails test command, it will not be shown. Like the full backtrace of that error will not be shown. But if you run it using -b switch, then it will show you all the backtrace of that particular error. Now this is like my favorite feature. So if you want colored output in test, and a lot of people want it, like people like the colored output of tests, so that will be present by default. Now if you run Rails test command, your test output will be a colored output, so you will get all of these nice features while running your test in Rails 5. The other big difference that is present in Rails 5 is related to controller tests. So internally, a lot of things have changed for writing controller tests. Now, in previous Rails versions, we were used to use these two helper methods for testing the controllers. Like we can use assigns, and then we can check whether that instance variable is assigned in a controller action or not. Or we can check whether a particular template is rendered or not by this controller action using assert template. Now, these two methods are completely deprecated in the Rails 5. And why? So basically the reason behind deprecating these two methods is we should not test the internals of controller. We should not test which instance variables that controller is assigning or which template that controller is rendering. Because ultimately it is not telling us that the response was successful or the page rendered what it wanted to render. It is just testing somewhat superficial things. So in the Rails 5, these two methods will be deprecated. And if you are using those, like you're upgrading some app which is already using these two methods, then you have to include this action controller testing gem in your gem file, and then these two methods will start working. But by default, they will not work because these methods are deprecated. So the other thing is related to controller tests. Like they are internally now integration tests. So internally, controller tests are actually replaced by integration tests. So in Rails, previous Rails versions, this is a typical controller test to test the index action. We visit the index action using get helper, and then we assert that response was successful. But in Rails 5, if you generate the controller test, like if you generate some scaffold for, let's say, post resource, then your test will look like this. Instead of the index action, now we have a post URL. So internally, what Rails team has done is they have replaced the controller tests by integration tests. So all of our controller tests, which still get generated in test controller, they're actually wrapped by integration tests. So we cannot pass a particular name of action to these get, post, patch helpers. We have to pass a particular URL, like post URL or users URL. Without this, those tests will not work. So that is one thing. The other thing is, in previous Rails versions, the class for these tests, controller test, was action controller test case. But in Rails 5, it will be action dispatch integration test. So if you generate a new Rails app and if you generate some test using the generators in that app, your controller test will have this superclass action dispatch integration test. This is because, as I already said, the controller tests are internally replaced by integration tests, and that is reflected here. So Rails 5 has sort of soft deprecated the action controller test case tests, and I think in 5.1 they will be removed and they will be part of a separate gem. So you don't have to like start converting your existing action controller test case tests from now, but in the future you may have to switch from them, or you may have to use external gem which will be extracted from Rails. But right now they are sort of soft deprecated. So new Rails app will not generate them, they will directly generate the integration tests. Now why this was done? So this was done because in Rails 5 the focus is switched more to integration testing than testing internals of controller or actually writing controller tests. And a lot of effort has been spent into speeding up integration tests also. So in previous Rails versions, integration tests were not that fast. They were slow compared to controller tests. But in Rails 5, there will not be that issue. They will be comparable with controller tests. A lot of effort has been spent into making integration tests faster. So again, Rails 5 has done some deprecations in controller tests. There will be gems which you can use to have the old code running as it is, but the focus is shifted more on integration testing and not controller testing. So this was related to like what all changes that are made in testing our apps. Now we will see some of the features related to caching. What all new features that have added for caching in Rails 5. The first thing that is added is HTTP cache forever. So in our web apps, we have a lot of places where we just have static content, that there is no dynamic content in this particular home page, or there is no dynamic content in this about page. So but we are just rendering that page again and again and again, even if that page is just static. Now rendering that page has some costs, like your Rails web server will be hit, and there will be response will be served slowly if your Rails server will be hit again and again for the same static content. So Rails 5 allows us to cache such static contents forever by providing this HTTP cache forever helper, and we can use it in our controller code like this. So we just wrap it in a block, and then we pass what we want to render, and that response will have a proper cache control header set, so that next time if the request comes for same index action, browser will not request Rails. Basically it will just check the browser headers and it will serve that content from browser cache. So this feature looks good, but it has some problems also. So because it is in the name itself, HTTP cache forever, it will actually set the cache control headers to cache the content forever. So if you want to if you want to purge that cache, or if you want to invalidate that cache, you have to have some mechanism to do that. Otherwise you will face some issues, because it will set these response headers so that that content will be literally cached for a lot of time. So if you want to use it, it's a good feature, but yeah, use it with caution. Make sure that you have some way to invalidate it also, if needed. This was related to caching our responses. Next up, we will see how we can cache collection objects. So we know that we can use a lot of collection objects, like @users is equal to user.varCityPune. This will create a active relation collection object. Now in previous Rails versions, there was no way to cache this particular object. Now let's see how we can cache this. So let's say that I have run this query for the first time. Now let's say it has given me 10 results. Now, in which scenarios this result is going to get changed? Either a record gets added with City Pune, or existing record with City Pune gets deleted, right? In these two cases, the result of this query will change. But if nothing of that sort has happened, I can confidently say that at users will contain those 10 elements that I had queried for the first time. So if there is no change, like no addition or deletion in this particular criteria, then confidently I can say that the result of the query can be cached. So Rails 5 allows to do this by allowing us to do caching of collections. So there is a new method introduced on relation, which is cache underscore key. And this method will generate a particular cache key for a relation. So let's try running it on our users collection. So if we run this, then it gives us a string like this, where users slash query, and then there is a string. There is a hexadecimals, there is a alphanumeric combination of some characters. So this query will get changed. As we already saw, the result will get changed when something gets added or something gets removed. So internally, Rails will figure out that, okay, some new user has been added, or some new user has been deleted. It will do that calculation internally, and it will figure out whether the cache has expired or not. And then we can use this in our cache do end blocks. So we can just pass cache at user do end, and Rails will figure out that it will render the response for the first time. But then if there is same request comes for the next time, it will check whether at users is same or not, and it will do that based on the value of updated at column of the last element, or the maximum element, a maximum value of updated at. If it is changed, it will generate the new cache key, which was not the same as what was generated previously. And if the cache key changes, then obviously it will render the response again. So this helps us in caching the collections properly in Rails 5. This was possible before also, but there you have to write a function. Basically, you have to write your own code to generate a cache key for these collections. But Rails 5 will just automatically do it for you. It will just generate the cache key internally and keep track of it. But again, this feature has some limitations. Now, because we are dependent on a query, there are some limitations when using a limit clause or group clause with a cache key. The results of limit and group, they're not like 100% deterministic. So your cache key result can vary if you are using limits and groups. And I would say in that case, you have to take extra care of making sure that you're getting the correct result from the cache key. The other good thing that has been added in Rails 5 is partial caching. So we have code like this in our apps at a lot of places. Like we have a to-do partial, and we have a collection of objects which we want to render. So we pass that collection, and then in our partial we have a cache to do end block. So in previous versions of Rails, what used to happen was, for every object in that collection, Rails used to do a one single fetch for fetching the cache. So even if Rails could fetch 10 caches at a time, it used to do one individually, and that used to take some time. So there was a gem in before Rails 5 also, which was a multi-fetch fragments gem, which solved this problem. So it used some internal Rails code to sort of speed up this fetching of this cache from the collections, and it saw some speed improvement of around 78% as reported by author of this gem. Now in Rails 5, this gem has been folded into Rails, so it's part of Rails 5 now, and you can just use this gem by passing a last argument cached :true to your render call, and then Rails will automatically take care of fetching all the caches at once. So it will not fetch each cache individually. It will just do a multi-read to fetch all the caches at once, and this will speed up rendering your partials significantly. So this is sort of a big change which will hopefully affect many apps positively. So you just have to add this last argument and it will work out of the box. The other thing related to caching is related to action mailer. So similar to these cache do and blocks that we have in our app views code, in our application views, we can now we can use them in our action mailer views also. This was not possible in previous Rails versions. So now we can use this cache do and blocks in our user mailer or any other mailer views. And then you get all the benefits of caching in your mailers also. So this was all about how Rails 5 has improved caching, and now we will move to Active Record. Active Record is always a big part of Rails. It helps us in communicating with database and helps us with generating queries and stuff. So it is like we should see what has changed in Rails 5 for Active Record. So the first thing that is changed that you will immediately notice is application record. So in previous Rails versions, we know that the superclass of every model is active record base. And if you are using some gems which are also monkey patching active record base, then you have a problem, right? Because those gems can do some weird things with active record base, or if you are using some engines or plugins which directly monkey patch active record base, then your application will also get that monkey patch code and it will be a problematic situation. So now in Rails 5, instead of subclassing from active record base, it will by default have application record as the superclass, and this superclass will be specific to your app. So if any gem or any plugin is doing something to active record base outside of your application, that will not have any effect in your application. So that is a welcome change. This is sort of similar to application controller which we already have. So now the similar thing has been done in Active Record by introducing application record. The other good thing, according to me, which is related to querying the records, is Active Record relation OR. So we know that if we use where command like post.where something .where something, by default it generates a query with AND clause. But sometimes we do want a query with OR clause. So in previous Rails versions, we had to write the raw SQL by hand, or we had to use ARL to achieve this. But in Rails 5, we can just use this command .or, and then we can pass another subquery, so that Rails will generate proper query with OR clauses. Now, this feature is also like you have to take some care while using this feature, because you have to make sure that the clauses that you are passing, like the argument that you are passing, is a valid argument. Basically, the query that you are generating should be a meaningful query. So that part you should take care while using this Active Record OR feature. But again, it is very useful, and sometimes we need it too. So now we don't have to write raw SQL for that. We can just use this OR. The other thing that is added is hash secure token. So in our applications, there are a lot of places where we want to use some tokens for authenticating users or verifying that this user, we can send those tokens in our emails, we can send those, we can use those tokens in our application and stuff like that. So Rails 5 has a way of specifying that you have such tokens by adding this hash secure token line in your model. And then Rails will assume that, okay, you have a token attribute in your model. And then once you save the user, it will automatically generate that random token for you. So if you have some logic for generating this token yourself, that is no longer needed. Rails will take care of generating this token for you. And let's say you don't want to use this token attribute name by default. You want to use, let's say, a password reset token. So just specify hash secure token and pass an argument with whatever name you want, and it will use that column name. So it is not like it will just use token attribute. You can pass any other name to it also. These tokens are URL safe, so you can use them as part of your emails. You can send them to users, user can click them, and you can verify those users based on those tokens. Then you can also expire them based on some timestamp. These are also fixed length strings, so not like any random kind of thing is happening. They are base 58 encoded, so there is a guarantee that they're fixed length. And regeneration of these tokens is also possible. So let's say you have expired the token and you want to regenerate the token. So you just call user.regenerate token, and then it will just regenerate the token and it will save the user object. And one more thing I forgot to mention: when you call user.token, it automatically saves the token in database also if it is not already saved. So the token is automatically saved. You don't have to do user.save after that. And again, you can regenerate the token and then you will get a new token. Now, yeah, we will see what version migrations are. And this is one of the change which I like most, because it is a very good change according to me, and I will try to explain you why. So when we have a Rails app which is kind of upgraded from older Rails versions, it is always a problem with keeping up with our migrations. There are always changes in some new migration API. Like if you are migrated from Rails 3 to Rails 4, you might have seen that timestamp null false and null true always gets added or removed when you upgrade. So these kind of things make keeping our migration sane a bit difficult. And as we know that the migrations, whatever change we make in Rails API in migration related code, it has to be backward compatible with older migrations. Older migrations should not break with whatever the new code that is added in Rails for a new migration API. So Rails 5, but yeah, again, API must change, right? We cannot just say that, okay, for supporting the backward migrations, we will not change anything in our new Rails versions, because changing API will make things better. Like in Rails 4 and in previous versions, if you generate a migration by default for a table, you will see that null false clause is added by default. But in Rails 5, that clause is not added. Why? Because in Rails 5, the null false is assumed by default. So there is no mention of that null false in the migration. But when Rails 5 runs the migration, it will take care of adding that null clause automatically. So these kind of changes are good. But again, we have to make sure that these changes don't break backward compatibility. So Rails 5 has introduced a compatibility layer for these backward migrations, and it will take care of, it will basically make sure that whatever new changes that have happened to migration API, they will not break the older apps. And you can see this yourself. Like if you have a Rails 5, if you generate a new Rails 5 app and you generate a migration, you will see that all the new classes, the migration classes, they will have active record migration 5.0 instead of just active record migration. So the older versions that are there, they will not have any version, but all the new versions, Rails 5 onwards, they will have this version number in this migration file. And that will help Rails in understanding that, okay, this migration was made for this particular version. So it will make sure that that migration doesn't get affected by any future or older versions of migration API. So this is a sort of a welcome change that has happened. Now we will see what are the new changes that have been added in active support. So there are a lot of improvements related to date time, and there are some like next day, previous day. So you can do a time.current next day to get the next day. You can check what is the previous day by running time current previous day. Then if you want to get what is the time at next week at this same particular time, then you can get that by calling just next week method with same time as true, and then it will give you the time from next week but with the same time. So these things make handling date times a bit easier. Then you have some another method called as on weekend, which will tell you that, okay, the current time is weekend or not. If you are on a Friday, then obviously it is not a weekend. If you are on Friday, then it is weekday. So on weekday will tell you that it is a weekday. You will also get next weekday, previous weekday, similar to what we saw earlier for weeks. you can also use that same code for weekdays. Another thing that has been added is related to enumerable module. So you can now do pluck on your arrays or hashes. So this is a simple example of array of hashes. Now you can do users.pluck name. In previous Rails versions, we could do pluck on only on whatever the result that has been returned from active record. But now we can do it on arrays also. And it is not just one attribute. Similar to active record, we can also pass multiple attributes. Like I want to pluck ID and name, then that is also possible. And this has actually made improvements to active records pluck. And how that is done is because in previous Rails versions, what used to happen was, even if let's say in this example, I'm loading the users in users variable by user.all, and then I'm doing a pluck on users. So even if all the users are loaded, users.pluck will again still generate a query for selecting ID and name, right? Because it cannot run pluck on arrays, so it has to generate the SQL. But in Rails 5, because now we can generate the pluck command on enumerables, there is no need to generate that second query. You will just get the result from whatever data that has been loaded in users attribute, and it will work out of the box. Then there is also enumerable without. So if you have an array, car, bike, truck, bus, and you don't want car and bike, you can just call vehicles.without with those attributes, and it will give you whatever the remaining values are. Again, you can similarly call it on hash. Because it is enumerable, it will give you the resultant hash by removing those keys that are passed as argument. Now this is the thing that we saw before, enumerable and everything, that was okay. But this is one of the big change related to halting of callback chains. So in previous Rails versions, whenever we used to return false from any one of the before something callbacks, then Rails just used to stop the callback chain completely. So if you have first callback which returns false, and then if you have 3 other callbacks after that, those callbacks will not be run in previous Rails versions, because you return false from the first callback. It just used to halt that callback chain completely. This behavior is now changed. So in Rails 5, the callback chain will not get halt if you return false from anywhere of your callback before callback functions. So this side effect has been completely removed, and Rails 5 will no longer halt your code if you return false. If you want to halt, you have to use throw abort explicitly. And the newly generated Rails apps will add this constraint. So in newly generated Rails 5 apps, you cannot just halt by false. But obviously, this is a big breaking change. So if you are having an older application which relies on this behavior of returning false, you will face issue. So what Rails 5 has done is, if you are migrating from older apps, it will still halt. So for allowing you, it gives you basically a chance to upgrade properly. It will still halt if you are upgrading from older versions, and you get a configuration option. So once you update your code so that it is no longer dependent on returning false, you can just flip this switch in your configuration, and it will use the new behavior of throw abort. Now, all of that, what we saw earlier, was related to some modules, some caching related things, development, test, and stuff. Now we will see what has happened in improving the performance of Rails code. So obviously, a major release means there will be a lot of effort gone into improving performance of our code. And these are some of the specific pull requests that I have mentioned here. Obviously, there are a lot of things which are done beyond these pull requests also. But these are some of the significant pull requests which have improved performance of Rails 5 apps. So this one is related to improving performance of request objects. Like for every request, you will have a big decrease in objects and big decrease in memory now. Then this one is related to rendering of content. So that is also speed up by almost 28% now. This one is related to development, like because it is related to auto loading, it will not have much impact in production. but in development there will be around 10x speed improvement. And then these are also some of the examples where some speed improvements, some improvements where memory has been reduced, and this kind of stuff has done to improve overall Rails performance. So you can check these later. And obviously, this is not the only things that are present in Rails 5. We have just scratched the surface. There are so many things, things which are deprecated, which are completely removed, which are newly added that we have not discussed today. Some of the big things that we have not discussed today are attributes API, which will allow you to have custom attributes in your applications. So that you can have domain specific, like you can basically build a DSL, whatever your domain requires. You just don't have to tie it to your database structure. You can build a custom models on top of that. So that is possible using attributes API. I skipped it because it is a bit advanced topic and it was not possible to explain it properly in short time. But this is again a major feature of Rails 5 to look forward to. Then Sprockets 3, Sprockets 4. So Rails 5 will require Sprockets 3, which is an asset pipeline framework for Rails, which takes care of your JavaScript, CSS, and images. And it also has its own improvements. So that will be a good thing for Rails 5 too. TurboLinks 5, which is the latest TurboLinks release. Many people don't use TurboLinks in Rails world. Many people don't like it also, but it has some good improvements and it will come by default bundled with Rails 5 apps. So if you are not used or if you are not used TurboLinks before, do give it a read, do give it a try and see if it makes sense to use it in Rails 5 apps. So we have covered some stuff related to Rails 5. We have seen some new features, improvements, what is happening in Rails 5 and other stuff. So what's next? Where to go from next? So if you're just started with Rails, or if you're not used Rails at all, I would say that go to this link and read the Rails doctrine, which is written by creator of Rails, THH. And he mentions philosophy behind some of the decisions that are taken in developing Rails. So that will be a good read for you if you are just getting started with Rails. It will give you a overview of what Rails is, what are the basic core principles of Rails, and how Rails keeps with those principles, even in Rails 5. Rails 5.00 RC1 is going to get released in, I think, by this month end, in first few weeks of May. So if you are upgrading, if you have an app on Rails 4.2, do try to upgrade it so that you will you will see what are improvements that are present in Rails 5, and hopefully you will also find some issues in release candidates so that we can make the final release better. Also take note of this URL, weblog.rubyonrails.org, where you can see all the announcements related to latest release. This is the Twitter handle of Rails. You can check this out for some announcements which happen on Twitter. And obviously GitHub link. You can see daily what happens in the Rails world by subscribing to issues. So we'll see what people are doing in the Rails and whatever, like new issues that people are reporting, new features that are getting added in latest version of Rails. You will find all the information here. There is also a newsletter, This Week in Rails. You can subscribe to this newsletter and you will get all the information about what happened in a particular week in Rails world. So you will see what new features got added, what things got improved. So if you are just starting with Rails, I would say subscribe to this newsletter and it will give you a good overview of what is happening in Rails world. We also have a blog series on Rails 5, so you can go to this URL and see what are all the new things that are added in Rails 5. So I discussed a lot of things today, but again, there are so many things that are that we did not discuss today, and you can see all those things in small blog posts on this URL. So this is a good thing to check out and to keep track of what is happening in Rails 5, because we will be adding new posts till the final release happens. Again, try a release candidate so that we find some bugs before the final release happens. if you want, you can also try to fix some bugs so that Rails will become better. So let's try to make Rails better. Thank you.
Thank you, Prathamesh. That was a really comprehensive session on everything that's been raised. And we will quickly take up some of the questions that we have here. So the first question that we have is, when is the final Rails 5 release?
So currently, there are some issues right now which are preventing the release candidate to get released. So I think release candidate will hopefully get released by next month. By end of this month, or in first few weeks, 1 or 2 weeks of May. And after that, I think after 1 or 2 months, I don't know what will be the exact date of Rails 5, but I'm just predicting that it will be at least 1 month after release candidate.
All right.
So maybe by June.
Okay. So the next question we have here is, this came in when you were talking about the Rails API, what's new with the Rails API. So the question was, will the GEM Rails API be meaningless now with all the new things that have come up in terms of API?
No, that gem will no longer be needed now, because that is now part of Rails 5. So that is folded into Rails. It is no longer needed. Hello? Hello?
Hi, Prathamesh.
Hello?
Are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. So the next question is, for newcomers to Rails, there is always a lot of stuff that is exclusive to Rails that they have to learn for the first time. So what would you recommend for them as a resource to quickly get started with Rails?
So as I mentioned, subscribe to the newsletter. That is the best resource for getting started. Like, it will tell you what are the new things that are getting added in Rails each week. So it will give you a sort of basic overview of what happened in Rails in that particular week. That will be a good thing to start out. Later, you can also subscribe to GitHub Rails issue notifications, so that you can see what is happening in Rails world daily. So you will get an email for each issue, each comment, each pull request that is opened on Rails bug tracker. And that will give you some overview of what is happening in Rails. And then slowly you can start understanding the code. You can start understanding the issues that people face when using Rails. You can also keep track of the issues that you face when using Rails, and try to fix those issues or try to report those issues. That will give you a better overview of overall things in Rails world.
All right. Next up, is there any way to take control of the front end without sticking to the Rails guidelines, like say using JavaScript for the front end?
Yes, there are multiple, these days people have different approaches for handling JavaScript in the Rails apps. There are some solutions which use Webpack directly in Rails. But yeah, it is not part of the default stack. So if you're using them, you're on your own. So that's the main issue. But yeah, hopefully in future Rails versions, we will have better support for all of these external tools.
All right. So another question we have here is that, what is the future of Rails as compared to other frameworks?
That is a good question, and I think Rails is still relevant because it still has that features that people want in a typical web framework. And also it is trying to improve, like with introduction of API app or with introduction of WebSockets. It is still trying to improve and trying to provide people with new options to generate and keep up with the latest trends in web development. So hopefully, if there is something new, new trend comes up, Rails will try to adapt that too and still be relevant in future versions.
Okay, so as of now, we have already run over time with the webinar. And if our listeners have any more questions, please feel free to direct them to Prathamesh using his Twitter handle. You can also write them to us at webinars@therichvision.in, and we will forward all your questions to Prathamesh so that he can take them up. And so with that, we've come to the end of this session. And Prathamesh, thank you for a very comprehensive session, and you dealt with almost everything. Though, as you said, there's a lot that you could not deal with, and maybe we can visit all of that some other time. So thank you all our attendees for joining us today. And I would also like to inform you that our next webinar is on D8 rules, and it will be held on the 20th of April 2016, and the speaker will be Joseph Daberning, who is working with Amizi Labs right now. So I hope we will see you for that webinar as well. And registrations and all other details will reach you via mail, so stay tuned. Thank you once again for joining us today, and hope to see you at our next webinar.
Thank you.